Hey guys, it's Thermal Grease Monkey here, and I'm back once again with another video. If you guys saw last week's video, this is going to be a little bit of a continuation of that. Last week's video, I ended up fixing up an old photo editing rig that had an i7 6850K. In that video, I bought two CPUs and a motherboard to see what was the issue here, because we needed to test to see what the problem was. It ended up being the motherboard, and I was left with two extra CPUs, an i7 5820K and an i7 6800K. So I ended up buying my own X99 motherboard and deciding to do a little bit of testing with the two CPUs. My whole goal with this was to run a similar style to last week's, where we had the 1660 Ti paired with the 6850K. Unfortunately, I don't have a GTX 1660 Ti, I just have a regular 1660, so that's the GPU we ended up going with. I'll throw up the specs right here. We're going to be running an i7 5820K and an i7 6800K, 16 gigs of RAM with our GTX 1660. The four games we're going to be playing, we're going to be playing GTA 5, we're going to play CS2, we're going to play Black Ops 6, and Forza Horizon 5. Let's get things started off with GTA 5. I'm going to throw up the numbers right here for both of them, the 5820K and the 6800K. As you can tell, really early on, it's really close numbers. When we're running it at very high, our averages are 48 FPS for the 5820K and 51 FPS for the 6800K. At high, we have 91 and 97, and at normal, we're at 129 and 133, respectively. Now, it's a very close comparison between the two architectures. The 5820K is running the Haswell E architecture, and the 6800K is running the Broadwell E architecture. So the Broadwell, it's essentially a little bit more refined Haswell microarchitecture. Overall, when you're running at a high and normal, it's a smooth experience, and you're a little bit more bottlenecked by the GPU than the CPU more than anything else. Moving over to CS2, I'll throw up the metrics right here between the two CPUs. Averaged overall, we're averaging in the low 100 range, 108 to 111, and about 60 FPS for our 1% lows between the two CPUs at very high. When we move up to high, 139 to 145 FPS. At medium, we're at 183 to 195, and at low, we're at 216 to 231. Now, on the very high and high graphic settings, obviously it is a nearly identical experience, a 3 to 6 FPS difference, not very noticeable. But we do get a bit of a jump. We're looking at 12 to 15 FPS once we start turning down the graphics and start trying to push the frames a little bit more, but a very similar experience overall. As you're going to kind of see as we go on, at the high graphics settings, we're GPU limited, and you're going to see that at the lower graphics settings, where we're pushing more frames, that's where we're really going to start to see the CPU's bottleneck. Now, let's move over to Black Ops 6, where we have the extreme graphics settings. We're running at the average of the high 40s at extreme, and with ultra, we're in the low 50s. Once we turn things down to balanced, then we start being in the mid to high 70 range, and basic and minimum, we end up finding ourselves in the low to mid 80 FPS range. Overall, it is a pretty much identical experience across the board, a difference of 1 to 2 FPS, and you're going to have a nearly identical experience. You're more bottlenecked about what your GPU can do than what your CPU can do, but obviously, as you turn down the graphics and try to push more frames, the CPU is going to be limited. That older architecture is going to be a limiting factor for sure across the board, but it being capable of handling newer titles and newer games is still a good sign there. The last game we're going to throw at it is Forza Horizon 5, and this is where we saw a really interesting shift and probably a larger difference between the two. As you can see, Extreme 8X MSA and Ultra 8X MSA, very similar experience, difference of a few FPS, and it's more to do with the graphics card being the limiting factor, not having enough VRAM and just enough oomph overall to handle pushing more frames. When we move to the high 4X MSA and medium 2X MSA graphics settings, again, still a very similar experience. We start averaging things out, and this is where you start to get that good balance between graphics and CPU here. We're anywhere from the 80 FPS range all the way into the low 100 FPS range, depending on your CPU and your graphic settings. And once we get to low and very low, we're in the 120 range all the way up to 165 FPS. Again, depending a little bit on your CPU and your graphics choices. But you can really see at low and very low, there is a notable difference of about 10 to 15 or so FPS between the CPUs. And that's what we kind of see across the board. It's a very similar experience no matter which CPU you end up picking. This experience between the 5820K and the 6800K, it's going to be very similar. You're going to have a few FPS difference, but nothing super notable. So in conclusion, would I say this was a good experience? Yes. I would say the CPUs are a good option. They're super cheap. I got my 5820K for $12 and the 6800K was $20. So I would say it's a steal of a deal. The motherboards, you can find them for as low as $55 on Amazon. They're usually $55 to $60. A lot of times too, you can find these in a combo deal with one of these CPUs or a Xeon with 16 gigs of RAM for under $100. They're super cheap and a really nice option. The one caveat is it's not officially supported by Windows 11, so you are going to have to figure out a way to get onto Windows 11, or you're going to be stuck running Windows 10 or Linux or another operating system that is going to officially support this CPU. But I would recommend them. They are a good choice. If you're trying to push a bunch of frames, 400 FPS, something like that, probably not a great choice. These tend to top out at about the 150 to low 200 FPS range with their average FPS across the board, from what I can tell. It's an older microarchitecture. It can only push so much. But if you're not trying to push every single frame and you're not trying to play the latest and greatest games and have official Windows 11 support, it's a really good choice. They're really affordable and they still have plenty of performance in the tank. Pairing the CPUs with something like an RTX 2060 or an RTX 2080 would be a good option. Having a little bit more graphical performance where you can crank the graphics or be able to push a little bit more frames would be a really nice option and something that I would recommend personally. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video though. I hope this was a little bit insightful for you guys. I do have one more X99 CPU video planned out for next week, so please hit that subscribe button and push the bell icon so you guys will get a notification for when that video goes live. If you guys liked the video, please hit that like button. If you didn't, feel free to hit the dislike button. Totally understand. And if you guys could leave a comment for anything else you want to see me test with this hardware, or any other systems you want me to test, any other CPUs, GPUs, or challenges you want me to do. I'm always reading the comments and I always enjoy what you guys put in there. I always like hearing you guys' stories and feedback. So if you guys could leave a comment, it'd be really appreciated. So I'll see you guys next week though. Later guys.